I used to believe that love, when given freely and without hesitation, came back to you in ways you didn't have to measure. I am 72 years old now, and when I look back over my life, I see long stretches of quiet effort, things done without applause, without witnesses, without even thanks sometimes. That never bothered me. I wasn't raised to keep score. I was raised to keep my word. My daughter, Amelia, was born on a rainy Tuesday morning, the kind of rain that soaks into the ground slowly and makes everything smell clean afterward. I remember holding her in the hospital room. The world hushed except for the steady beep of a monitor and her tiny, determined breathing. In that moment, something settled into my bones. I would take care of her. No matter what shape my life took, no matter what I had to set aside, I would make sure she was safe, provided for, and never afraid of the future. Her father passed away when she was 9. A sudden illness. No warning. 1 month we were arguing over paint colors for the kitchen, and the next I was standing alone in a cemetery, gripping Amelia's small hand while she asked me questions I didn't know how to answer. After that, there was no room for indulgence or collapse. Children don't need grief. They need stability. So I learned how to be both parents without announcing the effort. I worked longer hours. I took promotions I didn't want because they paid better. I learned the language of mortgages, investments, and interest rates the way some women learn recipes. I became careful, strategic. Not because I loved money, but because I loved what money could protect. Amelia grew into a bright, expressive young woman. She had opinions early. Strong ones. I admired that. I encouraged her independence even when it meant she pushed against me. I told myself that friction meant she was becoming herself, and that was a good thing. When she wanted to attend a private university instead of the public one we had discussed, I said yes. When she decided to study abroad for a year, I said yes again, though I spent many nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was doing the right thing. I never framed my sacrifices as sacrifices. That would have made them feel conditional. I wanted her to feel supported, not indebted. When she met Daniel, she was 28. She called me after their 3rd date, her voice slightly breathless, as though she were walking quickly while talking. "Mom," she said, "I think this one is different." I had heard that sentence before, but something in her tone made me listen more carefully. I asked questions. Where did he work? What were his plans? How did he treat people who couldn't offer him anything? Daniel was charming in the way polished men often are. Measured, confident, effortlessly at ease. He came from a family with money, old money, the kind that never had to explain itself. When I met his parents for the first time, they were cordial, gracious even, but there was a subtle distance that never quite closed. I noticed it. I also chose not to name it. When Daniel proposed, Amelia called me crying, laughing, speaking too quickly. I congratulated her, told her how happy I was, and meant it. That evening, after the call ended, I poured myself a small glass of wine and sat alone at the kitchen table. The house was quiet in the way it only gets after you've lived in it for decades. I felt pride, yes, but also a deep, complicated tenderness. This was the point you raise a child for. To watch them leave. The penthouse was my idea. I had invested carefully over the years. Modestly at first, then more confidently as my understanding grew. Real estate had always made sense to me. Solid. Tangible. A place to stand. When I found the penthouse, top floor, sunlight pouring through wide windows, the city unfolding beneath it like a promise, I didn't hesitate. I imagined Amelia waking up there, drinking coffee by the glass, feeling secure. I imagined her never worrying about rent, about landlords, about what would happen if life shifted suddenly. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about anchoring her future. I paid for it outright. No loans. No shared ownership. I put the deed in her name alone. I told her it was a wedding gift, but in truth, it was something deeper than that. It was my way of saying, no matter what happens, you will always have a place that is yours. When I told Amelia, she gasped. Then she cried. She hugged me tightly, her arms around my neck the way she used to when she was small. "Mom," she whispered, "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I told her. "Just live well." The wedding plans followed quickly after that, like a tide you don't realize is rising until it's already around your ankles. Daniel's family had expectations. Large ones. The venue had to be appropriate. The flowers had to be imported. The guest list grew in ways I didn't understand. Amelia was swept up in it all, buoyant and radiant, trusting that everything would work itself out. I paid for the venue. A historic estate with manicured grounds and chandeliers that caught the light just so. I paid for the flowers, white roses, peonies, arrangements so elaborate they required a team just to assemble. I paid for the dress, custom-made, hand-stitched, the kind of gown people photograph before the bride even steps into it. Each payment felt like closing a chapter. Not painful, just final. I told myself I was easing her into a life she wouldn't have to fight so hard for. Daniel's mother thanked me once, in passing. "You're very generous," she said, as though commenting on the weather. I smiled and nodded. I wasn't doing this for gratitude. I reminded myself of that often. There were moments, though, small ones, that gave me pause. Decisions made without my input. Changes to plans I was informed of rather than consulted on. A seating arrangement draft that placed me several tables away from the family. When I mentioned it gently, Amelia laughed. "Mom, it doesn't mean anything. You know how these things are." I told myself not to read into it. Weddings were stressful. People got distracted. Love made them careless in ways that weren't malicious. Still, late at night, I sometimes stood at my bedroom window and looked out at the streetlights below. I thought about the penthouse, about the checks I had written, about the years behind them. I wondered, just briefly, if love given without boundaries could sometimes blur into something else. I pushed the thought away. After all, this was my daughter. And this was her happiest moment. Or so I believed then. As the wedding drew closer, the tone of everything around me began to shift. Subtly at first, like a draft in a room you've sat in for years. Nothing dramatic. Nothing I could point to and say, "This is wrong." It was the accumulation of small moments, barely noticeable on their own, that changed the air between us. Amelia moved into the penthouse 3 months before the wedding. I helped her unpack. We folded clothes together, arranged dishes in the cabinets, stood side by side while sunlight spilled across the marble counters. She was glowing with anticipation, already speaking about the space as our home, hers and Daniel's. I smiled, listened, nodded. I told myself this was exactly what I had wanted for her. But slowly, my presence there began to feel temporary. Daniel was polite. Always. He thanked me for the place, complimented my taste, spoke warmly about how lucky we are. Yet there was a carefulness to him, an unspoken awareness that this generosity placed him in an awkward position. I saw it in the way he deferred conversations to Amelia, in the way he redirected practical questions about the apartment back to her. The message was quiet but clear. This is her world now. You are a guest. Wedding planning meetings became increasingly formal. Once, Amelia would call me from the florist, holding the phone close as she laughed and debated colors. Now I received emails. Brief, efficient, already decided. The flowers had changed. The menu had expanded. The guest list had shifted again. When I asked if there was anything she needed help with, she smiled distractedly. "We've got it covered, Mom. Don't worry. Don't worry." I had built an entire life around worrying so she wouldn't have to. The first time I felt truly out of place was during a dinner with Daniel's parents at a private club. The kind with heavy doors and staff who know exactly where to look and where not to. The table was long, the lighting low. Conversation moved easily among them. Investments, travel, people I'd never met. I listened, offered polite responses when prompted, and sipped my water. At one point, Daniel's mother leaned toward Amelia and said, lightly, "You're so lucky to have married into such refinement." I wasn't included in the glance that followed. Amelia didn't correct her. She smiled, nodded, and squeezed Daniel's hand. I told myself she hadn't noticed. Young people often miss things that feel obvious to us. Still, something tightened in my chest. Later that evening, Amelia pulled me aside. "Mom," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "could you maybe let Daniel's parents take the lead on some things? It would make them more comfortable." "Take the lead on what?" I asked. She hesitated. "Just appearances. Traditions. They have a certain way." I understood what she didn't say. I didn't fit the picture they had imagined. From that point on, decisions seemed to happen around me instead of with me. I learned about changes after they were finalized. I was informed, not asked. When I mentioned costs or timelines, Amelia brushed them aside. "It's fine, Mom. We want it to be perfect." We. A word that no longer seemed to include me. The seating arrangement came back revised. This time, I was placed at a table with distant relatives and acquaintances. Not beside Amelia. Not near the front. I stared at the chart for a long moment, tracing the lines with my finger as though it might rearrange itself if I looked closely enough. When I brought it up, Amelia sighed. Not angrily. Tiredly. "Mom, please don't make this about you." The words landed harder than she knew. I stopped offering opinions after that. I attended fittings, tastings, walkthroughs quietly, nodding when spoken to, smiling when photographed. I told myself that being supportive sometimes meant being invisible. But invisibility has a way of seeping into your bones. Daniel's family grew more comfortable as the date approached. They spoke openly about their expectations, about the guest list, the press, the impression the wedding would make. I noticed how often the phrase "our side" came up. Rarely, "both families." Almost never, "your mother." One afternoon, I overheard Daniel on the phone in the Penthouse kitchen. He didn't see me at first. "No, don't worry," he said quietly. "She's generous, but she understands her place." I stepped back before he turned around. I didn't confront him. I didn't tell Amelia. I told myself I had misheard, or misunderstood, or that it wasn't worth stirring tension so close to the wedding. I had spent my life smoothing rough edges. This was just another one. As the final week arrived, the penthouse filled with activity, deliveries, planners, garment bags, florists doing last-minute checks. I hovered on the periphery, offering help that was politely declined. Amelia was radiant but distant, her attention pulled in 100 directions. The night before the rehearsal, I sat alone in my car after leaving the apartment. I rested my hands on the steering wheel and breathed slowly, the way I had taught myself to do during difficult moments. I reminded myself why I was here, why I had given what I had given. This was about love. This was about family. Still, a quiet question echoed in the back of my mind, one I was afraid to answer. When does generosity stop being love and start becoming permission? The day of the wedding arrived bright and unforgiving, the kind of morning that reveals everything in sharp detail. I woke before my alarm as I always do, and sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, listening to the house breathe. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple, elegant suit in soft gray. Nothing that would draw attention, nothing that would compete. I pinned my hair back the way Amelia used to like when she was younger and stood for a moment in front of the mirror, reminding myself to stand tall. This was her day. I was only there to witness it. When I arrived at the venue, staff moved around me with practiced efficiency. No one greeted me by name. I was directed, not welcomed. I followed signs instead of people, eventually finding a seat near the back, exactly where the seating chart had indicated. From there I could see everything clearly, perhaps too clearly. Amelia looked beautiful. There was no denying that. The dress fell perfectly, the veil catching the light as she walked. For a moment, my chest filled with something like peace. I told myself that all the awkwardness, all the small slights, were worth this. She was happy. That was enough. The ceremony passed quickly. Applause rose and fell. Cameras flashed. I clapped politely, my hands steady. When the couple exited, Daniel's parents were immediately surrounded. Embraced, congratulated, centered. I waited my turn, standing slightly to the side, watching as Amelia was swept away. At the reception, things shifted. The room was grand. Chandeliers, mirrored walls, tables set with precision. Place cards led guests to their seats. I found mine near the edge of the room, far from the head table. From where I sat, Amelia's back was mostly to me. I told myself proximity didn't matter. Dinner was served. Speeches began. Daniel's father spoke first, confidently, effortlessly. He thanked the guests, praised his son, welcomed Amelia into their family. He spoke of legacy, of standards, of how important it is to come from the right background. The room laughed softly at his jokes. I felt my shoulders stiffen, but I remained still. Then Daniel stood. He smiled, adjusted the microphone, and scanned the room. "I've been very fortunate," he began, "to marry into a family that values generosity." A pause. A chuckle from the crowd. "My wife has been incredibly supported," he continued, "and we're grateful for the help we've received along the way." Help. No mention of the penthouse. No acknowledgement of the wedding itself. Just help. Then he added lightly, "Of course, not everyone understands the level we're stepping into now, but we appreciate the effort." There it was. A few guests laughed, uncertain but polite. I felt heat rise to my face. I glanced at Amelia. She was smiling. Not nervously. Not apologetically. Comfortably. As though this were harmless. Daniel raised his glass. To new beginnings. And to knowing where you belong. Applause followed. My hands stayed in my lap. A woman at my table leaned toward me and whispered, "Which side are you from?" I answered quietly, "I'm the bride's mother." She blinked, surprised, then recovered. "Oh," she said. "How nice." Something inside me went very still. Later, during the mingling, I approached Amelia. She was surrounded by friends, laughing, radiant. I waited until she noticed me. When she did, her smile faltered just slightly. "Amelia," I said softly, "could I speak with you for a moment?" She glanced around, then leaned in. "Mom, now's really not a good time." "I won't take long." Her expression tightened. "Daniel didn't mean anything by it," she said quickly before I could speak. "Please don't make this awkward." I looked at her, the daughter I had held through fevers, through heartbreaks, through every uncertainty of her life, and realized she had already chosen silence over me. "I understand," I said. And I meant something very different than she heard. The final moment came shortly after. The wedding planner approached me, clipboard in hand. "Excuse me," she said, her tone brisk. "There seems to be some confusion about your role in the family photos." "My role?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "We have you listed for a few group shots later, but not for the immediate family set." Daniel's parents requested a streamlined look. Streamlined. I nodded. Of course. As I stepped back, I caught sight of Daniel's mother watching from across the room. She gave me a small, satisfied smile. Not cruel. Just resolved. I left shortly after that. No announcement. No scene. I retrieved my coat, walked past the laughter, the music, the clinking glasses, and stepped out into the cool evening air. My hands were steady. My heart was not. I sat in my car and let the silence wrap around me. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply sat, breathing, feeling something heavy and final settle into place. In that moment, I understood something I had avoided for months. I had been generous. I had been loving. But I had also been erased. And erasure, once seen clearly, cannot be undone. Not without consequence. I slept deeply that night, the way you do after a truth finally stops knocking and settles inside you. When I woke, there was no anger waiting for me, no tears either. Just a clear, steady calm. The kind that arrives when you understand exactly what must be done, and just as importantly, what must never be done again. I made tea. I opened the curtains. I moved through my morning the way I always had, slowly, deliberately. Age teaches you that panic wastes energy, and dignity preserves it. The penthouse came back to me as a thought, not a wound. I had put the deed in Amelia's name, yes, but the structure of the gift had been intentional. A life of careful planning doesn't vanish simply because emotions get involved. The property was held in a living trust one had established years earlier, designed to protect assets from exactly the kind of instability that marriage can bring. Amelia was the beneficiary, not Daniel, not his family. And there were provisions, clear, lawful, unambiguous, about misuse, coercion, and marital leverage. At the time, I had told myself it was simply responsible. Now, I understood it was instinct. I called my attorney the following Monday. We didn't speak about feelings. We spoke about language, about clauses, about timing, about options that preserved my daughter's security while drawing firm, immovable boundaries around my own involvement. He listened, then said quietly, "You were wise to set it up this way." I felt no pride in that. Only relief. I didn't confront Amelia. I didn't send messages or demand explanations. I let the newlyweds return from their honeymoon to the life they believed they had secured. The penthouse remained theirs to live in, but not to control, not to leverage, not to parade as evidence of status they had not earned. 3 months passed. The first call came from Daniel. He was courteous, even warm. "We're thinking of doing some renovations," he said. "Nothing major. Just upgrades. We wanted to check about selling afterward, maybe moving closer to my parents." I listened. Then I answered calmly, "The property isn't for sale." A pause. "But it's in Amelia's name." "It's held in trust," I replied. "For her protection." Another pause. Longer this time. "I don't understand." "I know," I said. And meant that too. The next call came from Amelia. Her voice was tight, confused. "Mom, Daniel says you won't let us make decisions about the penthouse." "I won't let anyone pressure you into decisions that don't serve you," I said. She was quiet. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried," I answered gently. "Many times. You were very busy." That was the last difficult conversation we had. Something shifted after that. Not overnight. Not dramatically. But slowly, undeniably. Daniel's visits became less frequent. His tone changed, less assured, more careful. The penthouse was no longer a symbol of conquest. It was simply a place to live. Months later, Amelia came to see me alone. She looked tired, older. She sat at my kitchen table the way she used to as a teenager, her hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. "I didn't see it," she said finally. "I didn't want to." "I know," I told her. "I thought if I stayed quiet, it would all smooth out." "Silence often sounds like agreement," I said, "especially to people who benefit from it." She nodded. Tears slid down her face. I didn't rush to wipe them away. Some lessons need space. I didn't take anything back. I didn't punish. I didn't gloat. I simply changed the shape of my presence in her life. I stopped funding. I stopped fixing. I stopped absorbing disrespect in the name of love. And something remarkable happened. Without my quiet support holding everything up, the truth revealed itself. Decisions became harder. Tensions surfaced. Daniel's expectations met resistance, for the first time. Through it all, I remained steady. Available but no longer invisible. Loving but no longer pliable. Today, I still see my daughter. Our relationship is different now. More honest, more careful. The penthouse still stands, sunlight still spilling across its floors. It remains what it was always meant to be, a safeguard, not a trophy. As for me, I have my mornings, my tea, my window. I walk through my days without the ache of being unseen. There is a quiet power in understanding this. You can give generously. You can love deeply. But dignity is not something you donate. It is something you keep.